Greetings and welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a sometimes funny, trying to be smart podcast covering all things new and classic Trek. Turn down the lights. I'm your captain, Myrriah Gossett. With me on the view screen, we have
Clyde Haynes. I'm sitting right over there. That's going to be my seat. Right there.
and
Great. Oh,
who else is here?
More, it's his first time on the show, guys.
It's
brand
Choose
new.
Your Pain, Paul Tatajic, everyone. T-Pain.
You choose your character. Anyway, choose your pain. We are returning back to our namesake. We're watching Star Trek Discovery in preparation for the final season coming in April 2024. Tonight we are discussing from season 1, episodes 3, 4, and 5. It's a doozy, which is Context is for Kings, The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, and Choose Your Pain. First, just a couple of reminders. Paul, where can people find this show or find ways to support this show?
Hey, reminders please subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. All links are at StarTrekPod.co. And if you love our content and would like to support us, consider donating $2 to our Patreon at patreon.com/StarTrekPod. Yes, I've done this before.
It's happening. We're a little rusty. We took a few weeks off for the holiday season. Clyde, if people are tuning in during this live stream on YouTube, how are some ways they can interact with us?
Well, they can whip out their handy dandy comm badge that's sent to all of our listeners and just, boop, 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 and we'll get the message. No, seriously, type capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod into the chat, and we'll take a look at your question, your comment, your concern, or your wrap up thoughts about the show. You can participate live with us.
Let us
And in a
know.
second, yes, and in a second, I'm excited to see. It's going to be like it's the brand new. You will know what we talk about here in a second. But just if you've got a overall thought about, I guess, any with the first episode, any of the 3 episodes, how we doing?
Let's just toss them all out. We'll talk about them in a bundle.
All of your thoughts in a bundle. Just type capital H, capital F, capital HF in the chat, and we'll take a look at your. We'll call them your warm nuggets of inspiration. That sounded weird.
Guys. I've got in this thing. Well, first I wanted to just mention Prodigy is now on Netflix, so you all can dive back into that. I know the creators have been asking people to try to watch all of that season as quickly as possible, keep them in that top 10 animated show list because it helps them get the numbers that they need to hopefully get us a season 3 after season 2 comes next year.
Yeah, I think tonight I'm just gonna turn it on, turn the volume down low, let it run, and go to sleep.
Just let the lights down low, watch some Prodigy.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not turning the lights down low and watching a children's show. That's not my thing.
It's to go to sleep, Clyde. We're talking about going to sleep.
I'm just saying.
Clyde.
Snooze into the comforts of Prodigy.
That's not. Doll's voice is not ASMR for me. I'm just saying it's not. That doesn't.
What is your? So I have a for a long time, I would fall asleep to what my spouse would call the most annoying cartoons ever and had no idea why. They were what I could fall asleep to. These would be South Park and Bob's Burgers, and specifically Louise Belcher's voice, which was Kristen Shaw, who's a very funny person and comedian and actor, would just pierce through the air. And somehow it just lulls me right to sleep.
Poor spouse. Listen, I'm simple. I'm a simple guy. I like a nice waterfall sound. It's not simple. It's very simple. It's not complicated. If I'm watching something and I'm dozing off, this is gonna sound terrible because I do like the show, but a really good way to get me to fall asleep is to pop on an episode of Madam Secretary.
Interesting.
Téa Leoni's voice is actually kind of soothing. I'm not gonna lie.
Straight to sleep.
I have a little button on my lower back, much like Data, that you could. But if I do this weird thing where I actually sleep sitting sometimes, a lot of times, and
I've been watching a show with you, Paul, and you definitely take a nice little nap.
And so I don't know if it's weird, but in some ways it's easier to fall asleep sitting for me than it is down. So
all TV and movies are fair game.
a movie to fair game. I think right now movies or TV shows around between 3 and 5 if I, like, have a little time at home and I decide, "Okay, I need to take a break," and I watch something that's prime time to, like, have a little 20-minute nap or anything post 1 o'clock. Choopy, hey, Choopy.
Should be
Uh,
Hi.
and that winds up being what's that winds up being something. And then, like, I fall asleep for like an hour, and then I go back to bed, and then I don't sleep for another hour. It's really weird.
Hmm.
If I'm struggling, I will pop on an audiobook. Almost doesn't matter which audiobook it is.
Mm.
It's a good one is Dune. Dune's a really good one. Pop on a little Dune
Straight to
with
bed.
and set the timer, set the audible timer for like 10 minutes. I'll never make it to the end.
Audible, if you'd like to give us money to make this
Yes.
podcast, just let us know. SpawnCon. But yes, I do think it is now time for us to jump into what I've decided to call a cold freak.
Cold freak.
What just happened there?
I made a bunch of new videos and audios for this segment, guys. Do you guys want to go through all of the new ones I made, or should they?
No,
Sure.
we just surprised them. But
Oh,
may I
man.
see the cold freak one more time because the
Yeah,
audio
yeah.
was key.
Yeah, let's get it.
Cold freak.
Cold freak.
No, I got it. I'm just processing.
I put snow on it and frost.
No, I saw. It's very good, very good.
Yeah, this is why you guys should join us in on the YouTube so you can see all of this beautiful work I'm putting together.
Yes, if you're not on the U in the tube, you're missing out on all the
You
visuals.
and the tube. Okay, let's go ahead and jump in with episode 3. Context is for Kings. This was directed by Akiva Goldsman. Story by Brian Fuller, Gretchen J. Berg, and Aaron Harberts. Teleplay by Gretchen J. Berg, Aaron Harabetz, and Craig Sweeney. Okay, what did y'all think? Thoughts on this episode?
What's your
Well,
cold freak, Clyde? Because
well,
that's a thing now.
my first thought was to be because like we've been doing this for a while, so I immediately was like, "Oh, Myrriah's gonna love this episode."
Yeah.
I was like, "Scary monsters, dark corners." This has got Myrriah Gossett written all over it. But I think overall, I thought it was a great way to start to introduce kind of Burnham back into the kind of the fold. I thought
Mhm.
kind of a quick nugget cold freak.
Paul?
I think I liked it better than I originally experienced it. Partly because, like, I'm a little more aware of the absurdity of it in some ways.
Hmm.
And so, like, you watch it and you're like, "Oh, that's silly. That's hilarious." Whereas, like, when you're watching it live for the first time, you go, "This better be amazing because it needs to be everything I want and more." When you're waiting for it, and then when it's not, like, you blame Myrriah Gossett, but, like, but I think now, like, with a little more perspective, I think, yeah, I think it was quite enjoyable.
So I have a question. As we talk about this, can we talk about it as though we've seen all of the episodes post this episode?
I mean, I think we're not doing any spoiler-free reviews. I think it is interesting to go back and rewatch it. My hot freak is seeing the
No, we're not doing that, Myrriah. We don't do that
my
here.
cold freak
There we
because
go.
it's an older episode. So it's been sitting on the ice for a minute, if you
Your
will,
icy freak.
an icy freak. I mean, I have to say on this rewatch, I'm like, man, season 1 was really good.
Yeah. Yes.
And I feel like it got anyway, it's like disproportionate amount of hate from so many people, and I was just like, guys, this is really good TV. And I, of course, to your point, Clyde, love this. It's spooky, it's scary. This to me was the episode that also really said, like, this is not your 90s Trek. We had like really horrific horror aspects. We had body trauma, body horror. You had fully dead people, very graphically dead bodies on this ship when they get to the Glen. I also think it's really fun to see the development of Lorca, knowing what we know will eventually happen, right? So I think it's been a really fun rewatch to see how they've been able to pepper in, I think, some of these moments specifically between Lorca and Burnham to kind of give you a bit of a hat tip that Lorca is not who he says he is.
Well, I'd add a couple things to that because I agree with you 100%. Like one, the thing that I was reminded of is in that in Lorca's universe, in the mirror universe, he and Burnham are an item.
Right.
And so when he looks at her, so it
There's that
starts to put,
tension there. Like,
yeah. But the fact that he'd want her close to him, the fact that he'd want to save her, like all these things make sense. Where originally when we watched it, they didn't quite make sense at the time.
mhm.
It's like, why is he doing this? Because it basically felt like he killed a bunch of people to get her on his ship, right?
I mean, yeah, it's like, what would you do for this person that to you is totally different, and you're trying to see if this is the same person that you fell in love with, and it's interesting to watch from that perspective.
I,
Um,
like it is interesting because like my favorite uh Discovery episode is the Giorgio goes back to the past
mhm,
episode, and you see Taryn Burnham.
mhm,
Burnham is very, very different than 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 our Burnham. So like there's an aspect where I go, what's Lorca's deal? Because it'd be like if my wife were were nice and like caring and supportive. Like would I be able to be with that person? That's crazy.
I do wonder though if when he jumped into this universe and he saw that Burnham was, in jail for mutiny, to me that would be a signal to him, like perhaps there is a part of this Burnham that is the same as my Burnham,
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things like Burnham, our universe Burnham was raised by Vulcans,
Right.
and Terran universe Burnham was raised by
Taryn
Ev-
Giorgio.
yeah. So like there's a reason why it's really
Yeah.
different.
Um, I did also really enjoy our introduction to Paul Stamets in this episode, and it made me really
agree.
miss when I feel like I feel like Stamets was initially like a prime cast member in this season and has since been more of like a tertiary cast member in later seasons. Not not to say I don't love the additions we've had throughout everything, but it was just one of those moments where I'm like, man, Anthony Rapp was just so like uh dynamic to watch on screen in this first season with the development of this character, and it's such a lovely slow burn to see this seemingly like analytical engineer scientist, and then we get these like, in later episodes that we're going to, I think in episode 5 we get these sweet at home moments with Colbert, and I really love the way that that was sort of like slow revealed to us as a character. So I really enjoyed the intro to Paul Stamets, who, by the way, the actual Paul Stamets, the like real scientist that he is named after, has an incredible TikTok account talking about mushrooms. I
Mm.
highly recommend the follow. It's a delight.
This pod has a special relationship with Stamets. I tell the story all the time. When we started the pod, like within the first couple episodes or the first 4 episodes, we got a note from someone saying that they were Anthony Rapp, and we all joked that it was Anthony Rapp's assistant, only to find out that Anthony Rapp actually listened to the pod. I don't know if he still does, but to your point, when I go back, Myrriah, I look at this and because I was like, wow, it'll be interesting to see. The first thing that I noticed is I missed him from the first 2 episodes and was kind of annoyed.
Mm.
And then I was like, really though? Should I have been? And then the minute that he's introduced in the third episode, he brings so much to this ensemble. It is, I mean, like Burnham is the steak, right? So Burnham is the steak. You've got, to me, you've got Lorca, and you've got Saru as kind of side dishes, but Stamets is the salt, right? He's the flavor that brings it all together. Whereas like Tilly is kind of like some
Don't
honey
be bashing
mustard.
no Killy.
I was
See,
like,
please,
I'm waiting to
first
see
of
how
all,
far you're going with this meal
I'm
metaphor, and I'm very
first,
enjoying
first,
it.
first of all, anyone who listens to the pod knows that I will never bash Tilly ever, ever, ever. And in fact, the only thing that is better than a Tilly is a Killy. So
I also
anyway,
I
yeah,
also loved our introduction to Tilly in this episode. I think it's a nice refresher of where she started and then where we eventually go to, I think, with her. And she's I think going to be our primary character in the new Academy spinoff, which I'm looking forward to. And that would be my guess, official predictus. But yeah, she's such that wide-eyed, bushy she is like, I think, what all of us would be if we got into Starfleet Academy in so many
she
ways.
she is the Wesley Crusher character done perfectly. I'm not gonna say done right. I'm just gonna say done perfectly. Right? It is all fun, like all encompassing, not that annoying.
And
Right?
also gives us a small glimmer of like, she didn't come from somewhere easy, right? Like you can see that she's trying to prove herself in many ways. And I think it's a really smart pairing to essentially be like, this girl is so lonely that she's excited about being bunkmates with a prisoner. Like, so it kind of, I think, is a smart introduction to Tilly. This episode also introduces us to our giant tardigrade, who is come to known as the Ripper, big plot point in our next episode. But I really enjoyed the chase around the Glen. It did feel like those kind of nods to more classic Trek episodes where you're having to use your knowledge of the ship to outwit, a predator that's been aboard or an enemy that's aboard. And I thought it was a fun use of that. What did you all think, though, of and I feel like this is something perhaps we've talked about in other seasons because it comes back, is the use of Alice in Wonderland as this tether for Burnham in this moment. The silence and the stares.
Paul, do you have
Uh,
anything?
like, I think you use Alice in Wonderland in season 1 because you're hinting towards the mirror universe, right?
Right.
It's I've never thought of it as something that really applied to what I'm seeing in her journey. It's like something that you might be able to see in retrospect, but like it's a little dopey having her run through the Jeffries tubes, kind of kind of talking Alice in Wonderland to me, like
Mm,
uh, especially like I'm thinking like, would a Vulcan do that? I don't think so. So
yeah.
who would do that? Like aside from something on TV or on in a movie. That said, like my response is like, if I'm blinded to the fact that I haven't seen the season before, like I would just go like, this is this character,
Mhm.
and it would be still in the process of like trying to figure out who this character is. It's not like she talks Alice in Wonderlands ever again, in the other
Ever
seasons,
again.
right? So it's not like I feel like she's a big literary buff.
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting choice because I do agree with you, Paul. I don't know if I would immediately correlate her story with that of Alice in Wonderland, like especially um the first book, I think through the Looking Glass has some more interesting parallels if you're trying to set up the idea of the mirror universe, but I don't think everyone knows that there's like sequels to Alice in Wonderland, so it's easier to just jump into the one where she falls down the rabbit
Well,
hole.
Fast X is like a sequel to Alice in Wonderland. Like some
Exactly.
people don't know that, but like Jason. Anyway, don't worry about it.
Yeah, Jason Momoa is Alice through the Looking Glass, um but I do think it's an interesting choice given that I feel like typically in Star Trek there's so much attention given to grabbing onto like Shakespeare or some of the Greek classic, some of the more, quote unquote ancient classics
Sure.
versus something like Alice in
Because
Wonderland.
Shakespeare is really ancient, like
It's old. It's older than Alice in Wonderland.
I think sometimes, and I'm probably gonna get myself in trouble here. I think sometimes we give writers a lot of credit and we put them up on pedestals, and sometimes they deserve it, right? Like
thank you. I do.
Exactly. We look at we look at a George Lucas. We look at some of the Aaron Sorkin, and we say they've created something that is so deliberate and so well thought out that every detail is a hidden something. Right. And we sometimes we look at it as this is a perfect thing. And it's like a great song that you listen to over and over and over again. And on your 50th listen, you get something new. We sometimes I think we look at an episode and go, well, everything in it is perfect. Look, I think the whole Looking Glass thing and her reciting it to the Jeffrey Tools was something that they tried. And then by the second episode, they were like, yeah, let's not do that again. Right? Like, it was like it kind of worked there, but it was there's so much about this episode that worked. I look at this and go, at the time I was like, okay, if they had went back to that, then I would have been like, God, what's happening here? Like, is this really going to be a part of her character? Because if you do it 2 or 3 times, I feel like you're stuck with it and you got to keep going with it. And that would have just been a little bizarre.
Yeah, I think they realize she's not a character that's going to have these like outward monologue narrations to self,
and appearing crazy, because here's the thing that I feel like everybody forgets is you're in an open channel. Like everybody's listening to her like ramble on and on about
well, I did think of that as like, oh, is she doing this as a way to maintain comms? But then also I do wonder if it was supposed to be a little bit of a nod of like, maybe this is something she's picked up being alone in prison, that she just like has these moments out loud to herself. I don't know. That was kind of where my mind wandered, but I do want to go ahead and jump into episode 4, which is The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, where we have Burnham is now kind of studying this tardigrade that Lorca had what's her name? Landry bring over from the ship, much to the dismay of Burnham at the beginning. And we're trying to figure out how to get this spore drive really functioning. This has been something I'm like, I just kind of at this point in watching the series have forgotten all of these like hoops we've jumped through to get this to be a functioning piece of technology, that I've forgotten all of these crazy ass steps we went through. Because
yes,
like the fact that in episode 4 we established that we can use the tardigrade, and then by 5 we have it where Stamets is our navigator, is such a like quick succession of change of function that I've just been like, yeah, I don't know, it just works, and I believe that it works.
Well, it's also like watching it back is really funny to me because
the weird nipple clamps on the tardigrade, that was a choice. That
was a choice. And sometimes I have to be reminded that we are talking about a bunch of sci-fi people, and not for nothing, we have interesting choices. We make interesting choices.
It couldn't have just gone in its back. It seems to like being on all 4 of its legs.
We're getting way in a weird place here.
So we didn't make it weird. They made it weird, Clyde.
Yes. Where I was going was Landry. And so immediately, like, we're introduced to this Landry character who's like, I'm gonna put you in your place. He sent me to protect you. And I was like, my first thought was like, why don't I remember Landry? Like, what?
Because she
Like,
dies in episode 4.
I was
Which
like,
I had to confirm. At first I was like, "Oh, Landry really gets messed up." And then I was rereading and I was like, "Oh, this says Landry dies." And so then I
yes.
double checked and I was like, "Oh no, Landry gets killed."
Well, and this comes back to your point of this isn't your typical track, right? Like, first of all, we got introduced to like when Trek kills somebody, they're almost nameless. They're usually almost
Mhm.
literally nameless, or it's a device because someone is leaving the show.
Yeah,
This was kind of one of my favorite, like thriller horror movies is Deep Blue Sea,
I love Deep Blue Sea.
right? And one
Hey,
of the reasons
super
why,
smart sharks,
My
man.
my hat is like a shark's fin.
yes, listen, don't get me started on LL. Like I could recite half of his catalog. We're
Deepest,
not going there.
bluest.
That is a Patreon episode later. But like for me, the thing I liked about Deep Blue Sea is like at this point, Samuel L. Jackson is a headliner, right? Like when he's in a movie, you're like, whoa, that's the big guy. So for him to, spoiler alert, like skip ahead if you haven't
For
seen the
Deep
movie.
Blue Sea.
Yes. If he's standing there giving a monologue, right? Like people do. And in the mid sentence, the shark gets up and was like, enough of that. I never expected that. Never, ever, ever expected that. And so that is not something you ever really saw on track. That's not a part of that. For Landry, for us to be introduced with Landry, like she got a name, like she
Mhm.
got a couple lines, like it was like, okay, I can get with this. All right, let's see how this goes. Like fell into a trope and everything. And then to just get destroyed so quickly in like middle of it all
Mhm.
was surprising. And that's an ode to, hey, by like I'm letting you know this is not the track. This is definitely not your TNG Voyager DS9 track. This is not what this is.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, all right, I'm paying attention. You have my full undivided attention.
Um, the other thing that happens in this episode is we get a jump back to kind of what's going on with the Klingons, which we hadn't gotten in the last episode. And we find Laurel, who is still being loyal to Vok,
Fuck.
uh, but they have been overtaken by a different Klingon house, and there's a lot of double crossing. But I enjoy seeing this part because, well, one, I really love Laurel, and I'm excited that this is the beginnings of that character development. And then
Again, when
also
I saw this, I said, oh, Myrriah, she is the biggest Mary Chieffo fan I've ever seen.
one of the
She like
nicest people in the world.
Have you ever met her, Mariah?
Yeah,
Well,
multiple times.
did you meet her at like Star Trek Day?
I have met her at Star Trek Day.
Uh,
By Clyde. But we also have met elsewhere at other events.
just gonna
Um,
pout.
just go pout. She's very tall, very nice. But yeah, I love Mary Chieffo. I think Laurel is such an interesting character. Again, please give me a Soprano style Klingon drama show. I'm ready for it. And I like that we get to see this side of Klingon culture, where they're talking about sort of the matriarchs and how it seems to be this separate system working within itself of being like, hey, it reminds me of that scene in My Big Fat Greek Wedding where they're like, the men think they're the head of the household, but the women are the neck and they can turn the men any way that she likes. And it gave me very much that energy from Laurel.
Yeah, like the Klingons are so fascinating. Like to me, Star Trek has created the Klingons, and maybe Klingons more than any other race, with this deep, 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 like almost mythology to
Mhm.
it. And so I think it's fascinating to you hear stories, especially when you hear new stories, right? And so it's kind of like, and it felt like when Star Trek wanted to tell a Klingon story for a long time, the only story that they told was something in relation to Kittimer. It was
Mm.
always Kittimer. And so for Laurel to tell a new story about her own family and the choices that she made, like I felt like I was on the edge of my seat, just like, okay, then what happened? Tell me more. Like, it's bedtime stories with Laurel. Like, give me more, give me more. And so that wasn't wasted. As much, you mentioned it earlier, Myrriah, as much shade that got thrown at the first few episodes in season 1 of Discovery because it was just so new. On the rewatch, I'm like, man, like that was really good. Like Laurel became the much more interesting character than wanting to hear or see Vok. Right? I was much more interested
Yeah.
in Laurel.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job of like portraying that she has more than just like she sees Vuk, I think, more than just like a leader. Like I feel like they've done a good job through all of the makeup and props to Mary Chieffo of being like, oh, she's also romantically interested in this person and is like trying to find a way to save this person, knowing that this is the path is not looking good, and she's thinking like 5 steps ahead of all of these guys. So I'm excited to dive back into Laurel
Okay.
as the
So,
series continues.
so
But
here is my
uh-oh.
question to you. What's her plan?
What's her plan? I think she knows how she's got to save
Oh, no,
Vogue
no, but
by
she
turning
said
him into Ash Tyler.
to do what? To what end?
Well, I think she wants to find out how the spore drive is working because that's what we get into in episode 5. That's what she's the most concerned with.
So her thought is we need to put a spy onto Discovery
Hmm.
particularly
Yeah.
in order to get the spore drive
Hmm.
and see how they're magically teleporting.
Yeah,
Okay.
because she knows that like at this point, this other Klingon has come in and is like, oh, we are Cole. Cole is like, we need uh the invisible eighth thing. What is it called?
Cloak.
Cloaking.
Mhm.
I was like, I just lost it. We need the cloaking that occurs on this ship.
Mhm.
And so she's like, oh no, we don't need the cloaking. We need whatever this next thing is.
But that next thing isn't really in full display until the following episode. So
Right.
she at that time she doesn't know that there's this magical teleport drive. She's just taking Ash Tyler to go and like bio experiments on him uh
Well, I think to save him, I think she has a love of
oh
of this
100%,
person.
100%. But like, from a timeline perspective, uh I don't know if she had a plan until
I mean,
uh,
yeah, she could have just been like, I'm gonna hide you out on my matriarch ship until I figure out what to do next.
yeah,
Well,
and so like if that's the case, then like they could have just hooked up and he could have been like,
well,
her side piece as she
well,
was
I
just
think
living life.
I think it was a little bit more strategic than that. Like I think they may have not known everything, but
Mhm.
what I took away from it was they had just been basically defeated,
Right, at the
right?
colony. Mhm.
Uh-huh.
They'd been defeated. They're floating in space. They're trying to figure this out, like, and they're looking and going, okay, what do we do? And and now you've got this leader who's about to be just completely deposed,
Uh-huh.
and she's looking, and he's trapped. So
Uh-huh.
she's been out there. She's seen, okay, they've got a toy or something. He's been sitting there going over their logs. So he's understanding who people are, right? At least, especially because was it the half of the crew of the Discovery is the crew of the Shenzhen, right? And so he's sitting there by himself, about to starve to death, and reading through all their ship logs and understanding who they are. And she's looking and going, you might be a secret weapon that that you can do it. So I think from the minute that I think she had every intention on coming back for him,
Mhm.
but when she
Uh-huh.
came back for him, she came back for him with a plan,
Hmm.
and so she knew what she was going to do. And the fact that he hadn't killed himself or done
Like
something
like
Crazy.
to go with that, like, so she comes and beams on board the Shinzo, and she goes, "I have a plan that's going to cost you everything, so that you can, be back on top." Like, what's the plan in her mind? What's the plan at that moment? Because right now the
I
plan.
think her plan in that moment is to get him on the matriarch ship. I think that's where it stops at the end of that episode for me to make sense because we then jump. So episode 5, we jump a
Uh-huh.
month into the future. So we've
100%.
now have a time jump of a month. So I think for her it was, I'm going to get you on this matriarch ship because I know that we can figure this out. The matriarchs that are involved over here. Is what I think happened. The last question I had on episode 4 before we jump to 5 though, is when they're like, the ship saved Corvan 2. They just went in and like blocked those other ships and then blew up the
Klingon ships.
Klingon ships. But I thought they were supposed to do like an evac. So when they're all like, who saved us? The who saved us for me was a little like too much.
Yeah, I think in the end they just needed to stop the Klingon from bombarding, right?
I guess, like, to me, I was like, I thought you were supposed to, they kept calling for an evacuation. This doesn't look good on the surface of that planet. Anyway, I thought they were supposed to get everyone off of the planet. So then when I saw everyone on planet still and they were like, who saved us? I was like,
Santa Claus. That's
are
who,
you saved?
right, Clyde? Santa Claus.
Santa Claus did it. I mean, I agree with both of you. Myrriah's like, I thought it was a little bit much, and I felt like, why leave? Are
Yeah,
you safe? Like,
I don't know. Anyway,
and why not let them know? Like,
That
hey,
there's a top secret super teleport weapon ship that can jump around like I don't know. I
be
think
afraid. Like, be afraid. Like, we've got this weapon.
well, I know Lorca was like, we're gonna wait because I want them to see who we are and watch this jump
Mhm.
happen. Which felt very Lorca-y.
is that why he waited? Is that I thought he just waited so
Yes.
that they get close enough to the torpedo so they.
No,
No,
that
he
was
wanted to see
definitely
him.
of ego. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Are you sure? Because
yeah, he
if
said
you
it.
if,
He
like
said,
'cause-
I want them to see who did this.
Mm-hmm.
so the ships are coming in, they're
Mhm.
right on top of him. He black alerts away, and then in his place is a bunch of like torpedoes that blow
Yeah.
up and kill the Klingon ships, right?
Yeah.
So if he jumps away any sooner, they pull away, right?
I mean, I don't know. I think they would have shot at the ship again.
Well, no, but he black alert away, right?
He did, but he could have black alerted away, I think, much earlier than that.
At which point they would have pulled away from the torpedoes, the
I don't
Klingons.
know. To me, it felt very like I need them to see me, like very
Uh,
peacock
I
energy,
understand, like I understand, like, but as the last time that I fought in space battle, that's how I did
Uh-huh. Okay.
it.
Well, good to know.
Uh,
um, yeah, I felt very peacocking to me
oh, sure.
over strategy. But yeah,
But you said it earlier. It was very Lorca,
yeah.
right? Here's one of the things that I've been watching because I've watched a few more of the episodes, and I remember the first watch. There being a lot of conversation because I was not a Lorca fan. So I said,
Really, you do not like captains.
I do like captains. I just there's some that I don't like.
Look,
And I was trying to figure out if this particular, like, did I give Lorca a hard time? Was I giving him bad rap? And from day one, I was like, no, nope, I'm still with it. Paul, here's the thing,
let's hear a thing,
right?
Clyde.
Listen, I like a rom-com, right?
Okay.
Rom-coms are great because they follow simple rules.
Hmm.
Right now, you can do variations, but here's the thing about a rom-com. For the most part, a rom-com at the end, the person's gonna get the other person, right? They're gonna
Sure.
get together. If you do a twist and you want to get all crazy and be like, well, at the end they don't get together, great. That's gonna be a failed rom-com. So there's certain things that I just like I'm expecting, and you can play with a whole bunch of stuff. But 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 my captains and some of the core things that happen around those captains, I don't want mess with. when you start to mess with those, I push back. So in the cases that you're thinking about,
apparently, like Shaw, like
exactly.
the guy who trying to protect his ship, like yeah,
Here, so okay, so Lorca's borderline a bad rule, right? Like he is just throwing all the rules out. Like he
like Kirk.
literally, yeah, worse than that, worse than that. Because here's my thing about Lorca. Lorca not only has a treble on his ship, which is just a bad idea.
I love the little cooing treble on the desk.
Yeah.
But he also has said, hey, there was a monster aboard this vessel that killed everybody. You know what
Beam
we
that
should
shit
do?
aboard.
Let's lock it in my office. That's a good idea.
No, it wasn't his office. It was in his personal little dungeon.
It's like zoology experiment lab.
His closet. Yes. Let's put it in my closet.
Put it
That's
in
a
my.
good idea.
It reminds me of like, I don't know if you've ever met people who like trophy hunt. It's very like, come into my study and look at all of these magnificent
Listen,
creatures
yes.
I've put on the wall.
Listen, I grew up in Texas. That happened, and every time it did, I was like, I'm the wrong person for this. I am never gonna be excited about this.
Yeah.
So that was my thing with Lorca. With Shaw, now I softened on Shaw at the beginning, but Shaw messed with, to me, the canon of
I get, like, they're
of like,
you should really protect your ship unless it's Riker and Picard, at which point they do whatever you want, because
listen,
that's the way it is.
I'm not saying he did not bring up some valid arguments. I'm not, right? But he messed with the fantasy, right?
Oh, I get it. I get it. Here's this guy who like literally Picard and Riker go like, hey, let's trick him into doing
And he's like,
this
no.
bullshit, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna be tricked to do your bullshit.
Here's the thing. Here's what we've said. Like, here's the thing that Shaw did. Shaw basically has said every Vin Diesel, every Rock, every Steven Seagal, every James Bond. Here's what should actually happen in those cases. These people all go to jail, right? Like every movie.
To be fair, James Bond does have a license to kill.
Yes, but in the way he does
Gotta
it,
have your permits in place.
Just say, like,
the reason why I'm pushing so hard on this is because on my first watch of Discovery, like Shaw is the only character I liked. I'm sorry, not Shaw, like Lorca. And it took me a while to come to this realization. I go like, oh, it's because everyone feels so underseasoned. Everyone seems like a goofball. Everyone feels like they're not really.
I mean, it's also Jason Isaacs. It's like
Jason Isaacs is great.
he's great.
Malfoy's dad. Oh my god.
Well, but you bring up an interesting point, Paul. Discovery is supposed to be the best, most secret, fantastic ship. Yeah, this is supposed to be the best ship in the fleet.
No, it's a nerd ship. It's a science vessel. It just happened to be in the middle of a war.
Yeah, but it's got this technology on it.
Oh,
and when we think about Voyager, when we think about the Enterprise, and the Enterprise in particular, right? The Enterprise is always the flagship of the Federation,
sure,
and it's always stocked with the best of 100%, everything.
100%.
Right. So when you talk about seasoned, everybody on the in TNG, everybody on there is the best at what they do. And if they're not the best at what they do,
they're out.
They're second. Well, here's the deal. They're second at best what they do. And that best is going to get, it's going to do something stupid. It's going to get blown up. And then Geordi's going to become chief engineer. Like that stuff is going to happen. Like it's just about to happen. And to your point, when we first meet the crew of the Discovery, with the exception of, I think, Stamets, they don't jump out at you as the best of the best, which is very different when we go to a place like again, now we're in Strange New Worlds and we're on the Enterprise,
and everyone's the best of the best.
And I mean, I think you're with the best of the best.
I think it does make sense though. If you're like, this is a science vessel during a war, you're going to put probably your best sciencey officers all aboard that ship, and sure, like Saru at this point is not a great number one. but he is more than competent and is someone who is like, proves himself many times over. And on paper, I think looks very impressive, right? Like all of his accolades and
Sure.
accomplishments at the Academy. So I can see how it is a bit of a whiplash when you come from other shows, but I think it makes sense within the structure of this show.
Yeah, no, like
You,
it took me a bit of time to come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Where like where when you go to the California class, you expect everyone to kind of like
Ayo.
kind of like to be not sovereign class worthy, and they
Mhm.
aren't, and it's okay. It's totally okay.
Yeah.
Not everything needs to be like a 3 Michelin star restaurant crew. Like sometimes you have but
Sometimes you need and want trash.
and if you want to call Discovery's crew trash, fine. It's okay.
I'm not calling them
It's not how
trash.
I see it. It's not how I see it.
I'm all about the highbrow and the lowbrow. Like give
Yeah.
me like a fast food burger and a glass of champagne. That's like a beautiful combination.
you know what I think I'm missing from this original Discovery crew is they haven't given me an Ortegas, a Data, a Tom Paris, right? Like what I need is somebody who's so good at flying this ship, that you always feel like you're gonna be okay. And there's nobody on the Discovery crew, at least at this point, that you're like, yo, you
Yeah.
can
We
fly the
eventually
hell out
get
of
there
this
with
ship.
Kayla and Owoshikun. Like,
Eventually,
yeah.
yes.
Like
But
I
yeah.
think like this reminds me. Imagine like X-Men First Class
Mm.
without Magneto and without Professor X, and you just have people just trying to figure stuff out. That's what Discovery feels to me like. Plus Lorca, who kind of knows what to do, except that he is like a sociopath. You know, so that was a very interesting mix from my experience of Star Trek. Like it was such a divergence from what I was accustomed to. It really took me a time to really accept that.
Yeah, I think we often also have not seen any Star Trek where, besides Deep Space Nine, where folks are really like at war, right? And
Yeah,
there is
sure.
a difference between being on a ship and being on the station, right?
And there's only
So
one real episode in Deep Space Nine where, like, it's really war-y,
mhm,
like the like the battle fatigue of war, and that
right.
is viewed as a very strong episode because all these people have PTSD, blah 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 blah. But even like even in most of the show, even it's like we're sitting cool, happy with our food replicators, and we're warm. And then we go on the Defiant, and we pew 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 pew. We
Mhm,
kill some Jemadar. We come back like it. So it is a very true thing that you're not in the trenches like we are in what you call it in Discovery, and
right.
to be leaning for further, it's a bunch of nerds on a science ship who don't really want to be here because we're not about the naval aspect of Starfleet. And now
Yeah.
you kind of drafted us into this, and you brought Landry here, who's baby psycho. Like I don't I see why there's such uh there's an organicness of how this has happened.
Mhm,
But coming in as a viewer of Trek, you go like, what am I watching? It feels so foreign, so alien, that you were like going, "Oh, this am I watching even the same franchise?" And it
mhm,
gets there. It does get there. Like,
mhm,
I wonder if if Discovery had the same art direction as Strange New Worlds, if that would have been an easier transition. Because, for all of it, one of the things that Star Trek is known for, except perhaps maybe in Voyager, but like, just some color, right? Like
Yeah, it is very grayscale, very cool tones. But I don't know. I didn't
I
mind the jump because to me it did feel like, oh, I'm watching like
uh-huh.
modern Trek.
Sure,
And but
modern retro Trek.
right. And it did, I mean, to your point though, I think part of like what is charming about like Star Trek 2009 is there are those like pops of color throughout that,
Sure,
even as like a modern take of the original series is the movie. So
like like those Star Treks were comforting, and like in some ways, Discovery was the first choice to make Star Trek confronting as a series. And so
Yeah, like when they say like we're making a prestige drama, like no offense to the marketing team over at Paramount, but to me it always struck me as kind of funny that they would push Picard as their prestige drama show, when to me I find Discovery to be a much more like in the vein of like we're making a prestige drama Star Trek.
yeah, 100%, 100%.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
But if they had made different choices in Picard, would that have been better? Like, could that have been their flagship prestige drama?
We don't have another hour to talk about Picard, Clyde.
I know. I'm just saying, like, the one thing to your point earlier, the one thing that's different between these two is there's a lot more action in Discovery. To me, listen, as I say this all the time, if you know me, you know I love a space opera. Discovery's much more of a space opera. Half the time, Picard, they don't even have a ship, near a ship, on a ship, where the ship they have can't be found. Right? Like, it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of monologue. It's a lot of dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, it in some ways, like when friends ask me about starting to watch Star Trek, I usually will ask if they watched and liked Battlestar Galactica, because if they did, I usually tell them to start with Discovery, because I think if you're someone who's already coming from that mind frame of like, oh, I like this type of space show, I think this is a very easy jump into that world. But going into Choose Your Pain, which was directed by Lee Rose, story by Gretchen J. Berg and Aaron Harberts and Kemp Powers, teleplay by Kemp Powers. We have Lorca being captured by L'Rell and the Klingons. We also get the famed moment in front of the mirror with Culber and Stamets brushing their teeth, and it's very cute. And we finally get our first official queer couple on Star Trek, and it made my little heart happy. And we also get introduced to Ash Tyler, I think one of the most divisive characters of Discovery.
We're saying a lot.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Who the actor, very charming. I can see exactly why he was cast. We also are introduced to Harry Mudd, who I'm really glad we eventually get an additional episode with, because Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd is very fun.
Very fun.
Very fun.
Favorite part of the episode.
Incredible. I thought this episode happened much later in the season, so I was surprised that it happened so early. Like
I know, it's like funny how things compress into your head when you're remembering these episodes. But I did think it was, again, another interesting jump into some of what's going on with the Klingons and seeing that ship. But then we also have sort of the morality going on Discovery of, do we continue to use the tardigrade? And now the tardigrade has made itself unusable. And Saru is trying to figure out how to be a leader for the first time, really.
It's really, it's dense. It's
a very dense episode, but I wanted to just point out, I thought the moment for me that was the most successful is the moment between Burnham and Saru in this episode, where we finally get to kind of the core wound of their relationship. And I thought it was a really lovely conversation that they have. And I thought it was really great character development for both, where Saru is like, I am not afraid of you. I am jealous of the fact that you got to learn all the things I could not get to learn. And I just thought it was a really great scene.
Yeah, no, like Saru's a little bitch. I mean, he's not so little. He's very tall.
Very tall. But I thought it was a very lovely acted scene between Doug Jones and Sonequa Martin Green.
Yeah, no.
I'm sensing a theme here. Like, listen, I'm not going to say
like Hawaii Five-0. Oh, no,
when I think back to like some of the pilots to TNG, Voyager, DS9, especially TNG, it wasn't like a perfect pilot, right? Like there's definitely some rough edges.
What?
But like the way those characters were introduced, it felt like a team. It felt like cohesive. Like there was a bit of a team up. What I'm noticing here is I look and go, Saru, he does seem a little whiny, a little like there's so much dissension in this this team, right? Half of them are like we immediately get this dialogue between Stamets and Lorca, like they hate each
Mhm.
other, right? This is a different crew, and maybe it's interesting. Like I think it's an interesting from a writing standpoint. I think it's very interesting that we're going through the I hate you, then you're my best friend, kind of arc.
Like
But
the
that's
way I would,
unusual for Trek.
well, I mean,
Even with Voyager, when you introduced the Maquis, that made
Mhm.
sense because you had two rival like groups that then felt like they came together fairly quickly.
yeah, I think in the 90s, like there was a style of writing archetype, and here in Discovery and less so in Strange New Worlds, but like, in Discovery particularly, there is a focus on psychological realism where you're like, oh, I'm in this battle situation. I'm a scientist. I don't want to fight. Why am I, like you're going to butt heads with the general, so there's in some ways like an archetypical a show written archetypically is easier to get on board with, like, kind of like any Marvel movie, for example.
Mhm.
Like, like you could get on board that quickly. You can onboard quickly.
I mean,
Uh
all reality TV shows are written for archetypes, right?
uh
Yeah.
but like, when you go to a psychological realism show, like you might not love the people immediately, but like you tend to have a richer experience because you're more into the nuance. And the question is, can they hook you long enough for you to like enjoy the nuance? And so, like, for that to be done for Star Trek, it's interesting. Like, like
Mhm.
Discovery is not my favorite show. That said, it is the boldest show that it's the boldest Star Trek that's been made because it
Mhm.
tries the most in a way that is like trying to be relevant and new and the same. It's, I would say Strange New World achieves it better, but it had like four shows to build upon to get the formula right.
Mhm.
So like
Mhm.
I think Discovery is the braver show, the bravest show. Oh, that. uh, Well, I take it back. Like, the original series is probably the bravest show because like no one that was out of nowhere kind of thing.
Mhm. But yeah, I think in re in revitalizing the franchise, it is a big swing, and I
Mhm,
think I find it a successful swing, but I can
mhm.
see how, other people would be like, "This is such a," the game is totally different than the game that you grew up with, right?
Yeah, I think like, there's a show called Top Chef. It's a where like uh,
Yes.
so
Really?
one of the
Is
yeah
it
it's
about
about
chefs?
and we're trying to find who the top one is.
Oh
But
man, I
like
would have never seen that
That's a
coming.
snazzy title. Gets right into what it's about.
yeah, but what one of the judges talked about, Clicchio said like the real mistake that some chefs do is like they try to make a dish that that they know, but they try to use a bunch of different ingredients. So let's say you do duck l'orange, but you make it with chicken instead of duck, and instead of like orange, you make it with lemon, and instead of using this stock, you make it with this stock. And so you know the formula, but you're changing the ingredients. The issue is like the more ingredients you change, the more exponential the variation is until it may not seem connected to the thing. And I
Mhm.
feel like Discovery did a lot of that in a way that was not comfortable to some people, myself
Mhm.
being one of them. Uh, but like, you know, after having several years to calm down and just watch it on its own merits, like 'cause if you've never watched Star Trek before and then you watch Discovery, I'm sure the experience is vastly different than what I
Yeah.
experienced. You know, uh, and and you go like, oh, like this is really interesting. Like you watch, I watched old Battlestar Galactica, and
Mhm.
that was amazing. But there were only like 2 or 3 seasons of it. Like I didn't have like four different shows
Right.
of Galactica, and then seeing the new Galactica. So when I saw the new Galactica, I was like, oh, pretty slick, pretty slick. Like I
Mhm.
because I can invest because I wasn't entrenched in its
Lore.
original
Yeah.
exactly. Not the lore is not the right word, like but the style choices that were
Mhm.
made, and and how to approach storytelling. Like
Yeah.
for all of it, like Stannis pisses me off because he's just so annoying to me, you know. But like if he were in any other show, like where he's like the smartass, I'm the genius, he would be fine.
Mhm.
He would totally be fine. But for whatever reason, because he's put in, this situation where there's a war happening, and you're being a pouty little scientist, and you're on Star Trek, and you're ugh, and all you do is play with mushrooms. Come on, man.
Play with mushrooms. Um,
But
speaking of mushrooms, we do get so Stamets does eventually inject himself with the um
tardigrade DNA.
tardigrade DNA, which is a wild thing to do, and he becomes the navigator and collapses, but it does come back to life. But I thought it was an interesting choice to have the mirror moment where
Yeah.
we see his reflection does not move, to let us know that obviously something is not right in the world anymore. And that will have to keep us hanging for the next episode. Um, I did want to ask y'all about our this is kind of our first big introduction to Culber. We get
Mhm.
Dr. Culber, we get an introduction to Wilson Cruz on the show. And what did you think about his intro? I am a big Wilson Cruz fan, so I was excited to see him on screen. But what were your thoughts?
I mean, I thought he was great. I think like he could be on a sovereign class. Like
He
hey,
could be on a sovereign class. He does seem like a very competent doctor.
would I put Tilly on sovereign class? No, and I love Tilly. I love me some Tilly, but
Not yet, but by season 3, she's
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
sovereign class ready.
But but Colbert, he's ready. He could. He's only there because his husband is there.
He's like, I'm stuck on this science vessel because of
E- ex-
you.
exactly. That's how I see. Like, because you can see that he has good bedside manner. He knows what he's doing. He's,
Mhm.
he's flagship ready.
I
We
I think when you have a general, right? Like for this to function really well, you need someone who's not afraid to talk truth to power and to be and for that truth to be accepted.
Thank you, Clyde.
Colbert is the person on the ship
Mhm.
that
Huh?
can effectively push back on Lorca a little bit. There's no one else who can literally
And
go, "Hey, whoa,
Stannis,
whoa, whoa."
Yeah.
he's the person who could talk to anyone and go, hey, calm
Stannis
down.
is doing a lot of pushing back, but he's not being heard, right?
Yeah,
And
Culver
Colbert,
knows how to say, "Here's what Stamets is saying, but packaged for you in a much nicer way."
mhm,
I did also wanna talk briefly about, the reveal of Lorca's last ship and
Mhm.
essentially how, we get the first nugget of information of how Mirror Lorca kind of survives, right? And
Mhm.
we, uh, pretty much establish here that everyone I will be interested in how it gets revealed because I don't exactly remember 100% of how we go from like, oh, I killed all of my crew to oh, the actual Lorca probably died actually with his
mhm.
crew and did go down with the ship.
I think if I remember correctly, the assumption is like they swap places,
Right.
and they assume that
The Terran one.
Federation Lorca could not survive in Terra Terran,
Mhm.
because it's too cruel. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly how they tied up uh actual Lorca in the series because I feel like there's always been a small glimmer of hope that that Lorca could still exist and come back in some way.
There is actually like they
Mhm.
didn't they didn't they didn't they didn't talk about
Right.
how there was no you never saw the body, right?
Right.
Now the fact that they're 900 years in the future is
Yeah,
probably a
probably
problem.
not gonna happen now, but
Yeah.
it could show up elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to continue the series, continue the rewatch. Is there anything else y'all wanted to discuss about these 3 episodes?
No, no. I think we're gonna hit episode 6 is my favorite. So, uh, we're gonna hit that next, and there'll just be me praising Rainn Wilson.
He makes a really good Harry Mudd. Very correct manic behavior with just a dash and a sprinkling of charm in all of the right ways. Well, yes, we will be back next week, y'all, to continue our discussions. We will be talking about episodes 6, 7, and 8. You can subscribe, rate, and review this show on Apple and on Spotify. Please share the show with a friend. I got a lovely text today from a friend who said, I've never watched Star Trek before. Where should I start? And I said, I've been waiting all my life.
All my life.
Waiting for a question from
you.
And I said, boy, howdy, I already got a list ready. So I sent her my list from the Comic-Con. So yes, please share this show with a friend. Tell them how they can start listening to Star Trek. They could even start right now with Discovery and do this rewatch with us. You can follow us on X. We are also back on Instagram posting when we're going to be doing things. So you can find us over there too. Yeah. Anything else y'all want to promote or talk about?
No. I think happy end of the year, everyone. I think 2023 has been a challenging year for some people, certainly me. And I think
ready to see it off. Don't let the door hit you with where the good Lord split you. Is that the saying? I think that's the saying.
That is the saying.
I like
Yes.
we look for brighter horizons for 2024. Hopefully there'll be some great Star Trek and some great conversations to be had.
Yes.
I'm just reminded how in 2019 I kept going, man, I can't wait for 2019 to be over. 2020's gotta be the year. It's gonna be a great year. And it's been pure chaos since. So here's hoping that 2024, there's something about 24 that is magical and refreshing and better and just more harmonious.
Indeed.
Or not, or some people say that the worst thing that happened to you is to live a long, boring life.
Who says that and why?
Let's hope we all get to live long and prosper in 2024. We'll see you all next week, y'all. Bye-bye.
See you next year. Oh.